closed, so there actually are 2 or 3, depending on the.
However,
there's
Mr.
usually
Chairman,
a summer
it's still
and a
a
winter.
club, it still becomes almost exclusive use.
In the case of Powers Park, there's Killiketi and et cetera, in summer.
Not
plus
just
other
in the
codes.
central area, of course.
So we have no more questions, so we're going to go to the First Amendment.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, could you possibly put both amendments up? Because there's no standing orders that relate to order of amendments. And
We
they're
will
both
put both amendments up, and
so that people can get an idea of what's on offer.
so the First Amendment is moved by Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Brewer. Councillor Casey, do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I was waiting for Councillor Lee to come into the room.
Councillor Lee, okay.
May I speak to...
So what I'm going to do is just, with the consent of the members, if we can just talk and debate over both
they the
amendments, is that okay?
I'll second that.
At the same time?
Are they the same or not? I just can't.
No, they
give
are
an
different.
Explanation.
They are different.
A's a bit better.
They are different. So I'm going to take the debate that you are debating on both. So, all right. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to speak as the Chair of Parks. In the governance structure that we have in this committee, we often deal with policy issues in a fragmented way. But it was very apparent to me on becoming the Chair of Park, Sports and Recreation in 2013 that we needed coherent policy for sports and recreation if we were to move forward. And in anything I've got to say, it is not intended to be disrespectful of officers or legacy councils, but the challenge, and it's one of those areas of great affection by the public that we have these facilities. The challenge was very great. We could see the growing population. We were seeing greenfield areas being developed, and it was very clear. And on that basis, working closely with Parks officers and with my Deputy Chair, Callum Penrose, and the local boards, we have travelled around the region to try and establish what are the codes for the future. What will a changing population want? What can we do to address the declining memberships of clubs? And in a time-starved population, how do we find those volunteers? And how do we train these people for the future? Out of that work was a decision by all of the council that we would adopt a sports facility network plan, which would the sustainability of sports would feed into that, and that would outline and prioritise those sporting facility needs for Auckland for the next 20 years. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail on that, but I think it's important that all of the councillors today actually understand that we've signed up to that, and that piece of work is going to be reported back before the end of the next financial year. And I think that that is a critically important tool in helping us understand what is required. I am not one of those who believes that we are going to have sports fields remaining without charges for the next 20 years. I actually believe if we are going to do justice to the demands that we are going to have to revolutionise the way that we support clubs and the way that we actually optimise the facilities that we have for the future. It does irritate me somewhat that we've preempted it, opening up Saturday's Herald and reading about housing on golf courses probably wasn't one of my finest moments. However, setting that aside and setting aside the distortions of the media on policy and the way that it's rolled out, we are living with a transitional problem, but as we have seen with most other significant issues that have come to this committee, Mr. Chairman, we have sought to find a regional solution. So whether it was on rates caps or whatever else, we've been reminded on a regular basis that we are one council now, and it's really important to me with sporting facilities that we are addressing it in a neutral and regionally fair way. And so I have a difficulty, and this is not in any way disrespectful to officers, but I think while we work our way through this transition, we know that that work that Dean Kimpton is overseeing that will come back to us in the term of the next financial year, we will then have the evidence that we need to make the right decisions on what charging regimes might be fair across. So to actually dump this on this committee, which is not a committee that is expert in matters to do with sports and recreation, I think is a bad call. And so it's for that reason I am suggesting that we request the governing body waive the fees for sports fields in the Central Local Board area until a region-wide policy is adopted in the 2016-17 year, when we actually have the information and the evidence that we need from the body of work that Dean Kimpton and the sports staff are very sensibly undertaking. So I'm grateful that Councillor Brewer is willing to second it, and I really would implore you to support this, because this is the only way that we are going to set a level playing field as we move forward. I want to be very clear that I think moving into the future there are going to be fees, and I think it's only fair that our sporting codes and clubs and volunteers know that that is something that they need to start gearing themselves up for, because that is just the reality of the future. But to impose this on just a few clubs in the old Isthmus Central area, I think is bad policy from this council. And at the end of the day, we are the governors, we are those that are making decisions on this. We're grateful for the information that officers can give us, but frankly at the moment they only have half the story when it comes to important policy on parks. That is the work that Dean's team is going to undertake with the Sports Facility Network Plan, and I wanted to defer a decision until such time as we have all the information, so I would ask you to support this.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no problem in supporting this at all. It goes to the heart of what we're all about here. Equity, fairness, consistency in planning rules, in rates and in charges is at the heart of the whole super city scheme, or said to be so. And this is anomalous, it is inequitable, and it is unfair, and we should have no hesitation in supporting this resolution. If there are, I heard from the officer that there was no political support for having consistent charges across the region. Well, fair enough. That's quite understandable. Therefore, I have no problem with another review. However, I think that the same lack of political support for extending charges to other parts of the region will still be there. So I'm more than happy to support this resolution, and failing that, I'm happy to support the next resolution. It just makes sense. The present policy doesn't make sense at all, and it's totally unfair. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking in support of Councillor Fletcher's amendment, there's a number of things that our local board chairs have said which I agree with. One, I think, first of all, the local board chairs talked about the socialisation of this, which they've been fortunate enough to have, but the governing body members haven't. And for that reason, I think it is really important for us to have that conversation and not make an ad hoc decision about regional policy at a Finance and Performance Committee. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that we need to be looking at how we... Mr. Chairman, can you please ensure I have my right to speak? Thank you. So I think in the end, we've got to look at the fact that a lot of the things we've had to do have been transitional over the last coming up 6 years, 5 years, and that these things do take time, but we need to do them carefully. We also need to make sure that we're not setting an expectation at this meeting of one decision or not. And I think that when you start to say we're going to remove sports field charges, that sends the message that we're going to do it all over. And as Councillor Fletcher says, and I support that view, we haven't done this work. We need to do this work. We can't have the group, one group of people saying we've got to keep the rates down and same people saying, well, we don't want people to pay. And we've also committed to looking at a piece of work that says how do we find ways to fund what we do and not just ask for it in rates. So I think that this is a wider piece of work and it should be reported to come to our policy committee. But in the meantime, I support waiving. I don't know how we propose to look at the shortfall in the budget though, because it's clearly there and it's very, it's just really interesting that of course no one else wants to pay. If you ask the local boards, if you ask clubs, if you ask anyone and say, would you like to pay or not? Of course they're going to say no. That's just natural human behaviour. So, but we have to make a decent decision about what we're going to do right across the region rather than just make an ad hoc decision about policy here. So that's why I can't support the removal of sports charges at the moment until we have the piece of work done, Mr Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Penrose.
This is the government delegations.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. This is a bit of a difficult one for me myself today, but I think the purpose of what we're sitting around this table today, all of us are, is the health and well-being of people in our communities. And I think it's our number one role is to keep people active and healthy in their day-to-day lives. And we often talk around this table about building our volunteer base in our sporting codes right across the region. And the last thing I want to do is just encourage people to play and be an active part in sport. And often we see too much on national television where, violence becomes the norm on their sports fields. And whether it's tensions, I don't know what it is, but we need to mitigate that and get rid of it. But keep people active out there in our communities. Again, I go back to the position we're in today. I would have thought we would have dealt with this through the LTP process. And again, we're sitting around this table at the last hour talking about this, and as we go forward into the annual plan process. Like Councillor Fletcher, there's a body of work that needs to be done. But hey, 5 years on, we should have really started moving on that bit of body of work. Mr Chair, it's a difficult one. But again, it's one that we need to tackle and deal with. And, I sympathise with everybody around this table on their views. We've come through the thick end of the LTP, and we're talking about 181k here, and where we're going to find that 181k. The difficult thing for me around this table in 9 years in my local government was signing off the LTP. It would have been easy for me to say no. Like I said, it's damn sight hard to say yes. But I said yes for the reasons being to put Auckland in the right direction and New Zealand following behind it. Again, this is, 181k we're talking about for this financial year. I go back to those 2 years of the invoicing, but that's been explained to us. I come today on the provisos that I was going to support option 2, that the local boards find it within their LDIs and that we deal with it through the annual plan process. But listening to this debate today and the highlights that's been raised, I will be supporting this amendment today, Mr Chair.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. Just a very quick question to our Chief Financial Officer. This 181k shortfall, should the Amendment A pass, will be coming out of Parks budget region-wide?
Yes, it will need to.
Thank you. The second question, Mr Chair, is to you. I might be wrong. Wasn't there a staff C that was going to be part of these recommendations? And does that C, which we haven't seen, have any inference on the amendments before us?
C was up there before, but we'll put it up
Right, I
again.
must have missed
We'll
it.
put it up again. It's A3. Any further debate, councillor Cashmore?
No, it's clear, Mr Chairman, thank you.
What does it mean?
Okay, well,
Stand up.
at the moment we have two speakers, one includes myself and then councillor and I can perhaps...
Hang on.
Oh no,
Have
we
my
have
hand up
councillor
since-
Brewer, okay, well,
Second.
okay. Who?